Good morning. The Committee on Science, Space, and Technology will come to order. Pursuant to notice, the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology meets today to consider the following measure: H.R. 2096, the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2011. And we will have, we'll proceed with the markup. We'll make opening statements.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that the chair be authorized to roll votes today and cluster them so that members can participate as much as they can in this committee and the other committees that they have conflicting obligations with.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Do you have a question? Anybody? To roll the votes where we can get out of here on time. That way, if I let people speak past 5 minutes, well, it's my mistake. That's not going to happen today. And we'll roll the votes and not take them. You'll know when the votes are taken, just like we'll know when the votes are taken. Okay. So it is so ordered. Thank you. Now we'll proceed with the markup, beginning on the opening statements, and I'll begin. I yield myself 5 minutes, and we're going to be held to 5 minutes. Please hold me to 5 minutes and tap me on the shoulder if I go past them. I'm beginning right now. I'm very pleased to convene this markup this morning for consideration of H.R. 2096, the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2011. As our reliance on information technology expands, so do our vulnerabilities. Protecting the nation's cyber infrastructure is a responsibility shared by different federal agencies, including the National Science Foundation and the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I'm delighted that Congressman McCaul and Lipinski have reintroduced the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2011, which primarily addresses important cybersecurity efforts conducted by NSF and NIST. This passed last year out of this committee, and I didn't make it to the Senate. This bill will help to support these efforts through reauthorization of activities in 4 general areas. First, strategic planning for cybersecurity R&D needs across the federal government. Second, basic research of the National Science Foundation, which will hopefully increase security over the long term. Third, enhanced NSF scholarships. And by the way, we're spending about $17 million on these alone, so they are very important. To increase the size and skills of the cybersecurity workforce, and strengthened R&D standards development and coordination and public outreach at the National Institute of Standards and Technology related to cybersecurity. These are modest but important changes that will help us to do a better job of protecting our cyber networks, and I'm pleased to join as a co-sponsor along with Mr. Smith, Mr. Brooks, Mr. Wu, and Mr. Lujan. This is a good bill. It represents a small but important step in Congress's overall efforts to address cybersecurity issues. By strengthening agency coordination and cooperation on cybersecurity research and development efforts, the bill will help address the comprehensive cybersecurity needs of the nation. I want to thank Mr. McCaul and Mr. Lipinski for collaborating on this bipartisan effort. I look forward to continued cooperative efforts as we move forward. Long-standing members of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee know, as we all know, the committee enjoys a tradition of bipartisanship, and as evidenced by the legislation here today, the spirit of cooperation lives on the 112th Congress. I thank the gentleman from Texas and the gentleman from Illinois for setting this example. It's in that spirit of cooperation I seek to address concerns expressed in regard to legislation taken up by this committee. As you're all well aware, the Republican leadership put forward legislative protocols for the 112th Congress. The protocols are intended to guide the majority leadership in the scheduling and consideration of legislation on the House floor. While the protocols do not govern introduction of legislation, good faith compliance with the protocols will be necessary if such legislation is scheduled for the floor. In other words, the protocols do not bar introduction of legislation and provide that as communities work through the legislative process, good faith efforts to address and comply with the protocols can be accomplished at the committee level. In that vein, we have an open dialogue with leadership on this legislation and any legislation for that matter, as it's a priority for the committee on both sides of the aisle. We do want to get to the floor with our efforts, with our product. In my remarks at our organizational meeting in February, mentioned two policies which we wanted the committee to abide by when considering legislation. The first, deal with the goal that the committee will no longer consider bills that authorize, quote, such sums as may be necessary, unquote. For example, the legislation in front of us today in the previous Congress included at least 5 instances of the following authorization of appropriations language. They are authorized to be appropriated in the National Science Foundation such sums as are necessary to carry out this subsection for each of the 5 fiscal years 2010 through 2014. During the 110th and 111th Congress, my Republican colleagues routinely offered amendments that eliminated the phrase such sums as are necessary. That's the phrase which we do not want this committee to utilize. This is balanced with the desire to continue to provide agencies with flexibility within a defined amount of funding for the myriad of activities we might direct them to conduct. We continue to work through options by which to satisfy this. And second, policy dealt with providing sunset of not later than 7 years after the first fiscal year, and making a good faith effort to comply. It's my intent that we will not move legislation out of this committee that includes authorizations for a period longer than 7 years. There are other things.
I request unanimous
my time
consent
is
to allow.
almost up, and I will yield back my time.
No, I'm going to ask unanimous consent to allow you to complete your statement.
Well, a unanimous consent to allow me to complete my speech. I object. All right. Now, for your kindness, I'm going to represent you, recommend you for 5 minutes, and I know you're going to comply.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we are marking up the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2011, and it really is a good bipartisan bill, nearly identical to Mr. Lipinski's bipartisan cybersecurity bill from last Congress, which moved through the committee and passed overwhelmingly on the House floor. And I'd like to thank my colleagues, Mr. Lipinski and Mr. McCaul, for their leadership and work on this bill in this Congress. Computers, cell phones, and Internet have greatly increased our productivity and connectivity. Unfortunately, this connectivity and the departure of our infrastructure, our commerce, and a great deal of our day-to-day lives on information technologies has also increased our vulnerability to cyber attacks. H.R. 2096 would authorize research, education, and standards activities that are essential to our government efforts to strengthen the security of our current information technology systems and to build future systems that are more secure from the outset. The two agencies covered in this bill, the National Science Foundation and National Institutes of Standards and Technology, each play an important and unique role in the federal effort to secure our cyberspace. While H.R. 2096 is a good bill, I would be remiss if I didn't express my concern about our failure to consider this legislation through regular order. While H.R. 2096 is based in large part on legislation from last Congress, the truth is that the field of cybersecurity is rapidly evolving, and 2 years in this field is equivalent to a lifetime in many other fields. In addition, over the last 2 years, this administration has made great strides in strengthening the government's cybersecurity efforts. As a result, some of the provisions in the bill before us today are unfortunately already out of date. The fact that we are pushing this bill through the committee is preventing us from adequately and effectively doing our due diligence to ensure that it is as current as it should be. I recognize that the bipartisan manager's amendment will make some necessary improvements and updates to the underlying bill, and I welcome these changes. I also plan to offer an amendment today that will update Section 203 to reflect the current state of the national initiative for cybersecurity education, and I hope my colleagues will support it. As we mark up this bill, it is important that we consider the proposed fiscal year 2012 appropriations level for NSF and NIST. The research accounts for both agencies would be flat funded under the current House proposal. While flat funding might seem like a win for these agencies under the current circumstances, I think it is important that we recognize that flat funding is really declining funds when adjusted for inflation. The federal government is already suffering from a lack of adequately trained cybersecurity professionals in flat funding. These key agencies will further erode the human capital we need to build up our cybersecurity capabilities. It will also slow down much-needed advances in research and development on game-changing technologies. In addition, NIST is flat-funded. It will not be able to carry out the additional cybersecurity-related activities for which it has been charged over the last couple of years, including its cybersecurity education and awareness efforts, its identity management initiative, and its cloud computing security activities. It doesn't seem right to be touting this role in cybersecurity while also proposing a funding level for the agency that prevents it from carrying out critical cybersecurity-related activities. The truth is that we need to be cognizant of what these agencies will actually be able to accomplish from within the very worthy and important goals described in this legislation. I'd like to take a moment to thank the chairman for attempting to clarify some of the issues surrounding the majority's protocols in the 112th Congress. In recent weeks, minority members have voiced their concerns about whether legislation moving through this committee is consistent with the majority's policies and protocols, and whether those protocols are being properly applied to all legislation and amendments before the committee. And while I do appreciate the chairman's comments today, I think there are a number of unresolved issues related to the majority's protocols that will need to be addressed before minority members of the committee feel comfortable that we know the rules of the road. It is imperative that these clarifications be provided before the committee moves with additional markups. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to working with you and the rest of the committee. I yield back.
I thank you for an exact 5-minute speech. And I ask unanimous consent that my entire opening statement be placed in the record, as well as all members' opening statements be placed in the record at this point. Is there objection? Chair hears none. We'll now consider the bill H.R. 2009-6, the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2011. I will recognize both gentlemen who handle this bill. Recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCaul, to describe the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me say thank you to you and the ranking member for allowing this to come to the full committee. And I also want to thank my friend and colleague, Mr. Lipinski, for his great leadership and hard work on this this bill. This will be the first cybersecurity bill marked up in the House of Representatives. The cyber threat is real, and it's here now. Admiral Mullen will tell you that it's one of the greatest threats that we face as a nation today. Today's hackers are no longer thrill-seeking teenagers. They're organized crime syndicates, national militaries that commit espionage and cyber warfare. And from thousands of miles away, increasingly sophisticated foreign adversaries are electronically infiltrating sensitive U.S. computer networks to obtain military technologies. They have hacked into every federal agency, including the Pentagon. Foreign competitors and criminals unabashedly steal trade secrets from America and their companies through similar methods. There's been a huge theft of intellectual property from this country, from other countries like China and Asia. Domestic cyber threats are increasing at an alarming rate as well. For example, one anarchist community of hackers, Unanimous, declared war on the city of Orlando just last month. This week, 15 individuals were arrested by the FBI in the United States, and 5 individuals were arrested in Europe for roles in cyber attacks on major U.S. companies and organizations. Critical infrastructure systems that run our financial, energy, and transportation infrastructures have also become victims of cyber attacks and exploitations. America's laws for cyberspace are decades old. We are not prepared to meet the threats of the 21st century. One reason is because we do not have a workforce readily available. We also need to harden our federal networks from a cyber attack. That is why Congressman Lipinski and I have reintroduced the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2011, which passed overwhelmingly last Congress. This act incorporates key recommendations from the Center for Strategic and International Studies report, which I co-chaired, including improving coordination in the government. It provides for a strategic plan to assess the cybersecurity risk and guide the overall direction of federal cyber R&D. It updates the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, or NIST, their responsibilities to develop security standards for federal computer systems and processes for agencies to follow. It establishes a federal university private sector task force to coordinate research and development. It continues much-needed cybersecurity research and development programs at the National Science Foundation and NIST. It improves training of cyber professionals, codifies scholarship programs at the National Science Foundation that can be repaid with federal service. As I mentioned, it passed overwhelmingly last Congress. I hope we can do the same this Congress. Most importantly, I believe that H.R. 2096 is fiscally responsible. It is not being paid for with any new money, since it is intended to work within the boundaries of funds authorized and appropriated to NSF and NIST. As you may recall, in the full committee hearing we had at the end of May, witnesses from NSF, NIST, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Networking Information Technology Research and Development Program all expressed their support for this bill. I'm also pleased to report that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has also sent a letter of support for this bill. We have been working closely with NSF and NIST to ensure that this bill suits their needs, and I'm confident that this legislation will advance the excellent work these agencies are doing regarding cybersecurity. As we talk about threats facing the nation, and we have many, and we're in several wars, but the idea of cyber warfare to me is one of the ideas that keeps me up at nighttime because of the devastating impact it could have on the United States. And hardening our federal networks from a cyber attack from countries or from anarchists or rogue nations that want to do us harm that could cripple this nation, bringing down our critical infrastructures. That is why this bill is so important. I look forward to this markup, and I want to thank all my colleagues for their hard work on this bill and the staff for their hard work in what I consider to be a very important piece of legislation. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, gentleman. Yields back. I recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Lipinski, for his statement on the bill.
Thank you, Chairman Hall, and I want to thank you and Ranking Member Johnson for holding this markup on a bill that is certainly priority for me, and it's an issue that must be a priority for our nation. I hope that we can all work together to advance this important cybersecurity research and education bill that will help our nation counter the numerous cyber threats that attack federal and military IT systems every day, as well as the private sector. I'd like to thank Mr. McCaul for his work in taking the lead on as we reintroduced this bill in this Congress. 2009, our roles were reversed, and we worked together to advance this legislation through the House, where it passed on a 422-5 vote. Unfortunately, like far too many pieces of legislation, it was not taken up in the Senate. But it's my hope that by advancing this bill now and by working with Senator Menendez, who has introduced a companion measure this Congress, we can get this passed into law, perhaps as part of a comprehensive cybersecurity bill. We've all seen too much evidence demonstrating why this legislation is needed. It is clear that our adversaries are working tirelessly to exploit weaknesses in the IT systems of our military, government, as well as the private sector. Take, for instance, the recently disclosed cyber attacks against our military. In March of this year, an astonishing 24,000 Pentagon files were stolen during a major breach, an assault that Deputy Defense Secretary Lynn called the most damaging cyber attack to date on the military. I'm equally troubled that the Deputy Secretary's revelation that over the last decade, terabytes of data have been stolen by foreign intruders from the corporate networks of defense companies. The thefts include information concerning some of our most sensitive systems, including avionics, satellites, and network security protocols. The severity of this ever-evolving threat is clear. We must do all we can to arm our workforce and all Americans who are online with the most up-to-date research and technology that will enable us to build a cybersecurity program that's second to none. A program that protects our critical infrastructure, the federal government's computer networks, our troops, and most of all of the American people. The legislation we're considering today focuses on 3 areas where the NSF and NIST have already established some programs: research, education, and standards. It includes the development and implementation of a risk-based strategic plan for federal R&D, the forging of partnerships with universities and industry that explore mechanisms for carrying out collaborative research in cybersecurity, and a program aimed at increasing public awareness of cyber risks by requiring NIST to develop a plan for disseminating best practices and technical standards to the general public in a user-friendly format that will improve their basic cybersecurity knowledge. And I think this is one of the most overlooked pieces. And as we have the hearings that we had in the last Congress pointed out that computer hygiene is incredibly important and is one of the biggest weaknesses that we have right now in cybersecurity. The legislation also contains a number of critical education programs designed to train the cybersecurity workers of our nation in what businesses need. It pays particular attention to the workforce needs of the federal government by providing NSF fellowships to students pursuing advanced degrees in cybersecurity-related fields, and a scholarships for service program for students that agree to repay taxpayers for their education through service in the federal government. I believe this is a good bill that deserves the bipartisan support it received last Congress. I hope we can continue to build on the progress we made last year, and my colleagues will join Mr. McCaul and me to pass this important component of our congressional response to America's cyber challenges. Thank you, Chairman Hall, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. At this time, does anyone else wish to comment on the bill? If not, without objection, I ask unanimous consent that the bill is considered as read and open to amendment at any point, and that members proceed with amendments. Is there objection? Chair hears none. I move. The bill is now open for amendments. Are there any amendments to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. The first amendment on the roster is offered by Mr. McCaul, which is supported by Mr. Lipinski. The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment number 024, amendment to H.R. 2096, offered by Mr. McCaul of Texas.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, it's so ordered. Recognize the gentleman for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The manager's amendment makes minor clarifications to the Cybersecurity University Industry Task Force section and makes some technical changes to the bill. But primarily, it updates several provisions specific to the National Institute of Standards and Technologies activities in cybersecurity. Many of these changes were based upon feedback provided to us by NIST and are designed to update technical language and activities that have changed since this bill was originally introduced in the 111th Congress. Specifically, the amendment updates the activities related to NIST's creation and dissemination of computer security checklists. These checklists are an important part of ensuring that federal agencies have a standard process to reference when they are making sure their hardware and software systems are as secure as possible. The amendment updates language originally provided in the Cybersecurity Research and Development Act of 2002, ensuring that the technical wording reflects the current state of art, which has advanced to include more automated procedures. Next, the amendment clarifies that federal agency involvement in the development of international cybersecurity standards should be coordinated amongst the agencies. NIST is tasked with working with other agencies and private sector stakeholders involved in standards developments. The amendment improves on the language in the earlier version of the bill by clarifying that government representation is not mandatory and ensuring the involvement of non-governmental stakeholders. NIST is also required to report to the Congress on the coordination efforts. This amendment also updates language regarding cybersecurity awareness and education activities at NIST by clarifying that NIST will continue to coordinate these activities with other agencies with shared responsibilities. For example, part of the National Science Foundation's cybersecurity efforts support many college students who may ultimately serve in the federal workforce. So this part of the amendment supports NIST continuing to utilize their expertise and standards and best practices. It also requests a strategic plan and report to Congress so we can keep track and oversight of what all of the different agencies are doing and spending on cybersecurity awareness and education. And last but not least, the amendment includes language articulating that this bill is intended to work within the boundaries of funds authorized and appropriated to NIST. The language included helps clarify that we are not expanding the authorized amounts for NIST research activities, but rather highlighting some areas important to cybersecurity that should be included in the work they conduct within their research and development budget. And let me again thank Mr. Lipinski for working closely with me on the components of this manager's amendment, and I appreciate his strong support in making these important updates. And though the previous language was good, I believe that this amendment makes it even better. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I want to thank the gentleman for the amendment. I support the amendment. Is there further discussion on the amendment, Mr. Lipinski?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Move to strike the last
Recognize
word.
you for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'll be very quick. I want to express my appreciation for Mr. McCall's willingness to work together on these changes. Very pleased the manager's amendment incorporates feedback from both sides of the aisle. A couple of sections, as Mr. McCall did a very good job of going through what these changes are. A couple of sections, though, that I wanted to talk about. The amendment modifies the cybersecurity awareness and education language in Section 203 to require a strategic plan and report to Congress. I strongly support these modifications and appreciate their inclusion. However, I do wish that we had been able to find a bipartisan agreement on a language that would have been more representative of the current National Initiative on Cyber Education Program, the NICE program, that NIST coordinates and oversees. And I hope that we continue to work together on this matter as we move forward. In addition, the manager's amendment includes a new Section 205 to specify the source of authorizations. I recognize that there are still questions about how bills and amendments need to be drafted to comply with the majority's new policies and protocols. However, I'm not entirely confident that this language provides the clarity sought by some of my colleagues. And I hope that this also is an area we can continue to work together on as we advance this bill. I'm sure that we can continue moving this as we move forward on this to work together. We want to thank Mr. McCall for all that he has done. I think this manager's amendment makes some needed improvements to the bill, and I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Are there any other comments at this time, either side? Are there any amendments to the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas and the gentleman from Illinois?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
What? All right. Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 025, amendment to H.R. 2096, offered by Mr. McNerney of California to the amendment offered by Mr. McCall of Texas.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading without objection. It's so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for bringing this bill forward, and to Mr. McCaul and Mr. Lipinski for their hard work to advance cybersecurity capability of this nation within the jurisdiction of this committee. The amendment offered today is a straightforward and non-controversial proposal. My amendment simply ensures that our national laboratories are able to contribute their expertise as we research and develop standards to enhance cybersecurity. Specifically, my amendment adds national laboratories to the list of entities that should contribute to the Cybersecurity Education and Awareness Program. 2 of our national labs operate facilities located in Livermore, California, and employ many of my constituents. The labs and their employees are working tirelessly on issues that further our national security and our national research needs. Our national labs are making important contributions to the development and of cybersecurity technology and defenses, and I'm confident that they will make important contributions to the education and awareness campaign. For instance, Sandia National Laboratories established the Center for Cyber Defenders over a decade ago. The Cyber Defenders program allows computer science students to gain practical experience in the realm of computer operations, network protection, and information systems. By working with experts in the field, these students will better understand how to focus their education in real-life situations. Cybersecurity is a broad field that is constantly evolving, and promoting national cybersecurity awareness and education is an important goal. Our national laboratories and programs like the Cyber Defenders can be an important part of our efforts. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment and the role of our national labs in the field of cybersecurity. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and I thank the gentleman for his amendment, including the national laboratories to cybersecurity education and awareness for them to coordinate together. Support the amendment. If there's no further members wishing to be recognized, the vote will occur on the amendment. Are there any other discussions on the amendment? Chair hears none. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Are there any other amendments to the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
All right. The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 040, amendment offered by Ms. Eddie Bernice Johnson of Texas to the amendment offered by Mr. McCaul of Texas.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading. Without objection, it's so ordered. The gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My amendment today is really very simple. It seeks to update Section 203 of the Manager's Amendment to ensure that the activities authorized are reflective of the current National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, or NICE. Right now, the Manager's Amendment identifies 2 activities on the NIST Awareness and Education Program: the widespread dissemination of cybersecurity technical standards and best practices, and efforts to make technical standards and best practices more usable by individuals and small businesses. While these are important activities and one that NIST should continue to pursue, they do not adequately depict the activities being carried out under NICE. In fact, none of the activities authorized under the Section 203 explicitly mentions education or public awareness activities. I don't believe my colleagues are intending to change the scope of the existing initiative, but if we're going to authorize the Cybersecurity Awareness and Education Initiative at NIST, then it makes sense to ensure that we are accurately representing the current scope of work, and that is what my amendment does. Finding qualified personnel to fill cybersecurity positions across the federal government remains a challenge. For example, in 2010, DHS set the goal of hiring 1,000 cybersecurity professionals over the 3 years, but to date they've only hired approximately 200. Additionally, a recent report by the Department of Justice Inspector General found that FBI field agents lacked the networking and counterintelligence expertise to investigate national security intrusions effectively. Not only are federal agencies competing with the private sector for qualified personnel, but they are also competing with each other for these individuals. The success of NICE is essential, and it will go a long way to ensuring that we have the cybersecurity personnel necessary to keep individuals and companies safe online. I urge adoption of this amendment and will yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back the balance of her time. It has to be noted that, and it's my understanding that this amendment has been revised, and we only received the revision an hour before the markup today, or right around 9 o'clock. And while I'm certain that the gentlelady is trying to improve her amendment to make the program better, we can't consider the change on such short notice because members and staff have not had adequate time to examine the proposal. If the ranking member would withdraw her amendment, I'd be very happy to work with her as this bill moves forward and in progress. But
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to comment on that. The only change that was made, we got word that you would object if we remove the existing language and substitute. What we did was simply not remove the existing language and added the other points to it that were already constructed as amendments.
I yield the gentlelady another 5 minutes to discuss her amendment.
Okay, the only thing we did, we had made it a point to upgrade the amendment to current level of functioning by eliminating the first two statements that were made related. When we got the word that there was an objection to eliminating those two paragraphs or phrases, we simply added them back or didn't take them out and added the updated language to that. We're just trying to make sure that when we pass this bill, it's not already outdated.
Is there further discussion on the amendment, to the amendment?
Mr. Chairman?
Who seeks
Mr.
recognition?
McCaul.
Mr. McCall.
Mr. McCall, recognize you for 5 minutes.
Let me just say first to the ranking member that, let me commend you. This is a very, very important issue. I think, as Mr. Lipinski pointed out, the cyber education and awareness piece, the computer hygiene. When you talk to NSA, they'll tell you that's about 85% of what we need to do to protect our networks. And so I know that the chairman, his concerns that there's some last-minute vetting that needs to be done and maybe talking to some of the stakeholders. But I look forward to working with you. I think this can be, I think we can reach a solution here so that we can get this language in the final draft of the bill. And so with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and there is still an issue with the amendment being redundant, something that could probably be worked out, but the gentlelady has her right to make further answer. Or do I recognize anyone else to be heard on this?
I simply want to thank the gentleman, Mr. Chairman, and to thank you. I really don't know what to say. I'll be happy to work with him. All I'm trying to do is update the language. All we did when we found there was objection to removing the outdated language, we decided we could leave the outdated language there and just add the updated language so it'd be current. And that's all this amendment does. I'll be happy to work with Mr. McCaul because I want his bill to be the best we can offer. And it won't look like we didn't check to see that it was already outdated.
You yield back. Do you wish to withdraw the amendment and work with the two sponsors of it as we go? I want to give you every opportunity to do that.
Yes, I'll withdraw it, and as long as it's incorporated when it goes out of full committee, so that we don't look like fools sitting in language that's already outdated.
I can't assure you we won't look like fools, but I think that we'll either have a vote on it or you withdraw it. And I hope you withdraw it.
Well, let me just have some assurance. Before we go to the floor, will this opportunity exist?
Is there any reason why we can't?
I'm not trying to make the bill worse. I'm not trying to destroy the bill. I'm trying to make it look like we know what we're doing by sending out language where we are currently.
I think the amendment speaks for itself, and I
do
assure
too,
you that
Mr.
I want
Chairman.
to work with you before it goes to the floor.
Well, thank
But
you.
it goes to the floor after we adjourn today. We
Well,
may
at
have
what point
three-
was Mr. Cole? Okay. Well, what point was Mr. McCall talking about working with me? I will be happy to do that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Recognize Mr. McCall.
I do think that the gentlelady, this is an important issue, an important part of the bill that I think we want to make it as updated as possible. And so I'm very willing to work with the ranking member to perfect this language. We got this so late that we want to vet it some more, but certainly it could be added in a manager's amendment on the floor. And I think we're going to have some, probably some other amendments that will probably be doing the same thing. So I don't know if the ranking member, if that
Thank you. That's adequate for me. Like I indicated earlier, we had the First Amendment simply removed the outdated language and added the new language. When we changed it, what you call the quick language, all we did was not remove the outdated language and added to it the updated language. I don't have any pride of waiting. I just want to make sure that when the bill does hit the floor, perhaps, it will include the updated language as it should be, coming from a committee of intelligence or people of supposed intelligence. Thank you.
I guess because of the protocols that the leadership's put on this committee and put on this chairman, if you don't withdraw it, we'll have a vote on it. If you do withdraw it, it's my belief that the two authors of this bill would surely go to rules and ask that it be considered favorably. And if they'd assure you of that, would that help you in your withdrawal?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I just want the record to reflect that if this goes to the floor without this language, don't count me in as one of those who didn't know better. Thank you.
We'll count you however you, but right now we got to count this committee. You have withdrawn your amendment. Yes. Gentlelady withdraws her amendment. Are there any other discussion on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman?
Who seeks recognition?
Lujan.
Mr. Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I appreciate you bringing this to the floor. I have an amendment at the desk.
Oh, wait. We have to vote on the amendment.
Yeah, we're going to stay here till we do that, but we're not quite ready for that yet. We'll get to you in just a minute. It's withdrawn. We just go to the next amendment.
You need to know. Hang on.
Mr. Lujan, is there further discussion on the amendment offered by the gentlelady?
No. The gentleman from Texas.
Or on the gentleman, or on the bill itself from the gentleman from Texas?
No.
The vote will be on Mr. McCaul's amendment as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. And the amendment is amended and is agreed to. Are there any other amendments?
Mr. Chairman?
Who seeks recognition?
Here.
Mr. Bartlett yields for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I understand that the majority is willing to accept 6 of the following amendments. Is that correct?
I'll have to check on that. I know we do 4. I'm not sure 6.
My understanding is that the majority is willing to accept Lujan 030, Lujan 032, Lujan 033, Smith 042, Fudge 027, and Lipinski 032. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
You're correct if that adds up to 6.
Do the committee rules preclude considering amendments en bloc?
Yeah, take a unanimous consent.
Then may I make an unanimous consent that we consider these 6 amendments that the majority is willing to accept en bloc?
Is there objection?
Time?
Chair hears none. So ordered. It'll save us some time now.
No.
Sorry.
We're going to have to ask him to call out those numbers.
Does everyone agree to adoption of the 6 amendments en bloc?
All right, is there objection? Does everyone agree to adoption of the amendments en bloc? Is there objection? Chair hears none. They're adopted. And it's passed.
Tell them which amendments, 003, 032.
Let me repeat for the record. This involves amendments 030, 032, 033, 042, 027, 003, and 032. Wait a minute, exclude 003. That's the Clarke amendment. We have some problems with that. And amendment 032, that's 6.
That's 5, Mr. Chairman.
Clerk, please repeat those, if you would,
I have
for the record.
030, 032, 037, 042, 027. We crossed out 003, and then you said 032 again.
Lipinski,
33.
Well, he has.
032 Lujan and 032 Lipinski.
No what?
It's back to work.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to go out and come in again.
Okay.
030, Lujan. 032, Lujan. 033, Lujan. 042, Smith. 027, Fudge. 032, Lipinski. Now read back.
Amendment number 030, Mr. Lujan. Amendment number 033, Mr. Lujan. Amendment number 042, Mr. Smith. Amendment number 027, Ms. Fudge. Amendment number 032, Mr. Lipinski.
Mr. Chairman, just some clarification. Just want to make.
Chair recognize Mr. Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to make sure that with Mr. Lipinski's amendment number 032 and Lujan's number 032, that there's not any confusion that there's two separate amendments and that they'll both be included?
Yes.
I guess the answer is that's correct. Is there further discussion? Gentlemen, yield back.
Mr. Chairman,
Who seeks recognition?
over here, Mr. Lipinski.
Mr. Lipinski. Chair recognizes you for a
I-
quick 5 minutes.
It'll be much shorter. I just wanted to clarify, are we precluding debate time on this? Or, because I know we're trying to, Mr. Bartlett's trying to move this more quickly, which I agree with, but are we limiting debate time, or are we just saying will be voted on together?
Yeah, yes, it is in the interest of time, but if you have a statement you want to make, you can submit it for the record, and any member can submit it for the record. Is that, gentlemen, yield back?
I yield back. I just want to clarify for everybody what we're doing here. If we're going to preclude any debate, because I know procedurally we could strike the last word to speak, but I just want to know if the intention here is to essentially ask everyone to not do that, or I just want to make this flow more smoothly here if we can, so we all understand what we're doing.
I hope.
Yes, that is the intention.
And yes, that is the understanding. Are there any amendments?
So he's accepting.
Clarke? Who seeks recognition? What's
Mr.
next?
Chair, I do have an amendment on the desk.
Mr. Clarke, clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 003, amendment to H.R. 2096, offered by Mr. Clarke of Michigan.
Ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading without objection as so ordered. Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm offering this amendment to clarify the need for more research and development to protect digital identities, and that's to protect the American people from fraud and identity theft. And here's the reason why I asked you to consider this. Personally, I'm a guy that doesn't believe in borrowing money and using credit cards and consumer debt, and I don't buy anything online because I don't want to put my debit card and my money at risk like this. This is so important that we continue this type of research. It's already happening, though, too, panel. So we're not asking for anything new. This is actually going on right now, but this language will underscore the importance of continuing this type of research in digital identity to help protect Americans from fraud and theft when they want to buy something online. So it's going to help commerce, it's going to help our economy, and maybe give assurances of people like me who use debit cards that they can go and buy things online without getting their identity stolen or their money stolen as well. So I urge your support, and I do ask your consideration of this amendment. Again, there's no new money here. This program is going on right now. This language would just underscore the need for the research and development that's going on right at this moment.
I want to thank you for the amendment. Do you yield back?
Mr. Chair, I do yield back my time.
Is there further discussion on the amendment?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
And thank you. And I want to thank the gentleman for his thoughtful amendment. And I agree that anybody who's ever been a victim of identity theft certainly understands, the threat. The bill already asks NIST to continue important research in this area. The implementation plan proposed, though, has not been, in my judgment, fully examined by this committee and stakeholders before we move away from the R&D portion of what's happening at NIST. So I think having had little time to gather the feedback from the parties, I must withhold my support for this amendment today. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. I, too, am concerned about further broadening these activities at NIST to take a big step toward implementation until we've heard from some of the stakeholders, as the gentleman from Texas has set out. Is there further discussion on the amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to address it if I have time.
Who seeks?
It's the maker of the amendment.
Who? Mr. Clarke. Mr. Clarke, you're recognized for 5 minutes. Sir.
Oh, thank you again, Mr. Chair. This is already being implemented right now.
I beg your pardon?
This research is already being implemented right now. This is in response to the other member's question. This will just underscore and put a framework to make sure that these agencies continue to do this research.
You gentlemen yield back. Is there further discussion on the amendment? Hearing no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All in favor say aye.
Mr. Chair.
Those opposed say no. No. The noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to. Are there any other amendments?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
I yield to Mr. Clarke.
Thank you, Mr. Lujan. No, I will choose not to ask for a recorded vote. Thank you.
Does he want a recorded vote? All right. Are there any other amendments?
Mr. Chairman. He just came in. I was just
probably ready. Mr. Wu, of what purpose does the gentleman seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
All right. The next amendment is offered by Mr. Wu. It's Amendment 020. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
I will give a very...
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 020, amendment to H.R. 2096, offered by Mr. Wu of Oregon.
All right, I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading without objection. It's so ordered. Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll offer a very truncated statement. My amendment would give authority to the Director of NIST to convene representatives of the private sector and other relevant stakeholders, including consumer groups, to collaborate on the development of consensus standards, guidelines, best practices, and voluntary codes of conduct related to information technology security for use by certain private sector entities. As the committee knows, most of America's IT infrastructure is in the private sector, and these security standards are incredibly important, and NIST has been very good at convening stakeholders to develop consensus standards. And I believe this to be a very helpful amendment and urge adoption.
Gentleman yields back. Actually, we've heard from industry groups that are very concerned about your amendment, Mr. Wu, that it might be moving a little too quickly, given that it's based on a green paper that was only released last month and has yet to come to a comment period. I think we need some more time for companies and groups that would be affected by this legislation. I yield the remainder of my 5 minutes to Mr. McCaul for his suggestions on this amendment.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just say, Mr. Wu, conceptually, I think it's a great idea. I think NIST is probably the best vehicle to work with the private sector to establish voluntary guidelines and standards within the industry. And they have the expertise. I think the concern that has been highlighted to us from the sort of the technology companies is that the Department of Commerce has examined this, and there's a green paper that's out. What this amendment essentially would do would codify what's in the green paper, and all they ask for is the time, between now and the white paper. They're receiving input now from the private sector. And I think the technology companies would prefer that we wait till the white paper comes out when Department of Commerce and NIST has received this public comment. My understanding is that this will take place in the month of August, well prior to this bill coming onto the floor. And so I would offer my sincere commitment to working with you, because I do believe conceptually this is on the right track and what we need to do. So with that, I'd really like to follow up and work with you on this. I would hope you would withdraw it if you can, with that commitment that I personally will commit to that, because I do think conceptually you're on the right track here. I just think it's premature until that white paper comes out.
Will the gentleman yield?
And I'd be happy to yield, yes.
I thank the gentleman for his very helpful comments. This is not inconsistent at all with the gentleman's comments, but I think that one of the reasons why private industry is more eager to work with NIST is because they are consensus standards that NIST develops and not regulatory requirements, as some other agencies propound. I think that it is very helpful to await some further development, and I am very open to working with the gentleman, whether it is a second order amendment today, which I take the gentleman to not be offering, or to work together as this legislation goes forward toward the House floor to develop the appropriate incorporation of green and white paper recommendations. And with that, I yield back to the gentleman.
Yeah, and thank you. Reclaim my time. If I could just say, I agree with you that NIST is the best vehicle, I think, to work with the private sector as opposed to other agencies. And I think the private sector recognizes that as well on these consensus voluntary standards. And so as with the ranking member's amendment, perhaps we can, after the white paper comes out, I just don't want to codify what's in a green paper. I'd rather codify what's in a white paper, if that makes sense. And then we can go back, and if there's going to be a manager's amendment, which it looks like there would be on the floor, we can incorporate these very good ideas at that time. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Anyone else request time? Mr. Wu? Mr. Wu, recognize you. I think you have about 3 minutes left on your 5. But I'll give you 5 more.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I have a separate amendment. I have an amendment at the desk.
Might I inquire of you, did I understand you?
Oh, my apologies. On the prior amendment, I would like permission to withdraw the amendment.
Without objection, it's withdrawn. Thank the gentleman. Now, amendment, do you have a second amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Where is do you have an amendment at the desk?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right. It's have an amendment offered by the gentleman from Oregon. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman,
All right.
I am.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 019, amendment to H.R. 2096, offered by Mr. Wu of Oregon.
Ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading without objection. So ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My amendment is intended to highlight the unique and important role that community colleges can, should, and are playing in cybersecurity education and the training of cybersecurity professionals. In addition to serving on this committee, I serve as a co-chair of the Congressional Community College Caucus. Community colleges are oftentimes best suited to educate and train and retrain students in order to meet the employment needs of local businesses. Moreover, community colleges play a crucial role in educating our science and technology workforce. The American Association of Community Colleges estimates that 44% of students who receive baccalaureates or master's degrees in STEM fields attended a community college at some point in their careers. My amendment is simple. It requires the director of NIST to carry out an assessment of community colleges and cybersecurity education, including a description of the current role of communities in cybersecurity education, an identification of best practices, and recommendations on steps the federal government can take to improve or bolster the role of community colleges. As we are all aware, NIST has been charged with coordinating and overseeing the Interagency National Initiative on Cybersecurity Education, or NICE, which is a broad initiative focused on several critical aspects of cybersecurity education and the development of a skilled cybersecurity workforce. Although this initiative is not clearly spelled out in the underlying bill, it is my intent that the director of NIST be in charge of this assessment in his capacity as the coordinator and overseer of NICE. It is my expectation that the director will coordinate and oversee the other agencies that are part of the initiative in the development of this assessment and not carry out this assessment on his own. I think there is value to having the participation of all the agencies involved in cybersecurity education in the assessment, and NICE seems like an appropriate place to ensure that this will happen. I'm aware that the workforce assessment under Section 107 includes an examination of the capacity of institutions of higher education, including community colleges, to provide cybersecurity professionals with the skills sought by the federal government and the private sector. This is certainly important, and I support it. However, I note that in Section 107, community colleges are but one small mention in a small piece of a much larger workforce assessment. For all intents and purposes, in Section 107, community colleges are no more than an afterthought. I believe that community colleges deserve a much more thorough and comprehensive look, and that it is important that we pull them out and give them the respect they deserve. They have been frequently underserved and not at the table in congressional consideration. There is no doubt that community colleges have an important role to play in training future cybersecurity professionals and, indeed, in taking existing computer professionals and retraining them for cybersecurity roles or tooling them up further. Not only are they in a position to train students just entering the workforce, but they can also play a unique role in retraining. We often hear about the need for more skilled cybersecurity professionals, and at the same time, in this tough economy, too many people are out of work and looking for jobs. My amendment is intended to fill a gap that was left between the bill from the last Congress and the bill introduced in this Congress. I believe it to be a good amendment, one that is good for the workforce and good to complete the education array from high school through graduate school, and I recommend an aye vote on this amendment.
Gentleman, yield back. I thank the member for his amendment. Is there further discussion on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman,
Who seeks recognition?
Mr. McCaul.
Mr. McCall, recognize you for 5 minutes.
Well,
sir.
thank you. And let me say first, I agree with the gentleman that community colleges play a vital role in the education and development of a cybersecurity workforce. I think our concern with the amendment is that that's to be carried out by NIST, and I think there's a genuine debate over whether that's something NIST should be in the business of doing. In the assessment section of this bill, it says that the president is to address cybersecurity workforce needs in a report to Congress. And it included language, and I'll just read the quote directly from the bill: an examination of the current and future capacity of the United States institutions of higher education, including community colleges, that's in this bill, to provide cybersecurity professionals with those skills sought by the federal government and the private sector. So I believe that this bill, again, points out this determination should be made at the presidential level, not at NIST. And I was wondering if the ranking member would be willing to withdraw his amendment and work with us on some report language to the workforce assessment section of the bill on this topic. And I'd be happy to yield to the gentleman.
I thank the gentleman. I'd be eager to work with the gentleman either on report language or perhaps statutory language to be included in this legislation as we move forward with this legislation to the floor. And the reason why I want to keep open the possibility of statutory language is that cybersecurity is, as the gentleman knows, currently scattered in a number of different places. Education functions are also scattered in a number of different agencies, and technical or cybersecurity education is no exception. And I believe that the ARPA-E, America Competes legislation, I should say, that we passed has tasked a number of different agencies with education functions, and that the Manufacturing Education Program, or MEP, has specifically tasked NIST with some education functions. So I would like the gentleman to remain open to having some education components in NIST, because as we work together on this, we may find that there are pretty well related education components in NIST, and there may be more leeway in this presidential directive. And I find it very nice that the majority is interested in heeding this particular presidential directive, and I yield back to the gentleman.
And I thank you, and I look forward to working with you on this.
Does the gentleman withdraw 019?
I thank the gentleman.
Agreement for report language.
I thank both gentlemen from Texas, and I would ask unanimous consent to withdraw my amendment.
Gentleman withdraws. Is there further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, the vote will not occur on this amendment. We'll go to the next amendment. Any other amendments?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
All right. The next amendment is offered by the gentleman from New York, Mr. Tonko. Are you ready to proceed with your amendment?
I am, Mr. Chair.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment number 001, amendment to H.R. 2096, offered by Mr. Tonko of New York.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading without objection as so ordered. Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My amendment today is simple and straightforward and addresses one of the biggest concerns repeatedly heard from our Republican colleagues. On any given day in Congress, you can go to the House floor and hear members of Congress speak about how unfunded mandates and government regulation are hurting the economy. While I don't agree that regulation hurts the economy, I do, however, believe that if government is going to set policies on businesses or agencies, we should give them the financial tools by which to meet those policies. My amendment does just that. If it prevents unfunded mandates from taking effect if Congress does not also provide the funding to implement them. My amendment states that the activities mandated in Section 108, significant to the Cybersecurity University Industry Task Force, are not required to be carried out for any fiscal year unless the amount appropriated to the Office of Science and Technology Policy, OSTP, is equal to or greater than the amount appropriated to the OSTP in fiscal year 2011's continuing resolution. The amendment also states that the activities mandated in Section 110, the Identity Management Framework, Section 202, the International Technical Standards, and Section 203, the Cybersecurity Awareness and Education Program, are not required to be carried out for any fiscal year unless the amount appropriated to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, is equal to or greater than the amount appropriated to the NIST in the fiscal year 2011 continuing resolution. NIST has indicated that under the proposed fiscal year 2012 funding level, it would be unable to carry out any of the additional cybersecurity-related activities with which it has been charged over the last couple of years. The administration has made significant progress in meeting the near-term actions outlined in Cyberspace Policy Review, and NIST has a prominent role in fulfilling those objectives. For instance, under lower funding levels, NIST will no longer be able to coordinate the National Cybersecurity Education Initiative, or NICE, implement the National Strategy for Trusted Identities in Cyberspace, or carry out a number of its cloud computing security activities. Again, under this amendment, if the NIST or the OSTP budgets dip below the level in the fiscal year 2011 continuing resolution, both would be relieved of implementing the additional mandates in this legislation. Our cybersecurity is a serious concern, and as members of this committee, we should understand the importance of authorizing funding to go along with the policies we mandate to protect us from these types of attacks. The growing access to the Internet across the globe has proven to bring people together, but is also increasing the opportunities unfriendly nations and groups have that wish to launch cyber attacks against us. One of the most recent attacks was reported by Google last month. The company reported that Chinese hackers had broken into the Gmail accounts of U.S. politicians. The latest reports indicate that the account of at least one cabinet-level official was compromised. Sadly, these attacks will continue regardless of what we do in this committee today. However, what we can control today is whether or not we're going to provide all the necessary tools to the agencies that are charged with protecting us from future attacks. As members of this committee, if we are truly committed to our national security and want to prevent additional unfunded mandates passed by Congress, then we should all vote for this amendment. And I urge all my colleagues to do just that and support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair. With that, I yield back.
Thank the member for his amendment. He yields back. Is there further discussion on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman?
Gentleman from Texas.
I understand the gentleman's point.
I yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you. I think it's important to point out that these activities that in this bill we authorize for NIST are already being carried out by NIST and have for some time within the allocated budget. We are merely utilizing its authority to give some direction to these activities. I think that certainly it's within Congress's role to influence agency actions. This would say that we couldn't do that unless we appropriate more money each year. And I think it's we have to be realistic and within the confines of our current budget situation and the federal deficit that we keep in line with that. And on a practical note, I think this type of amendment would jeopardize this bill's passage on the floor. But I certainly understand the gentleman's point. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Who seeks recognition? Chair recognizes Ms. Edwards for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be brief and thank the gentleman. And I really support the efforts by the gentleman from New York. We are constantly asking our federal agencies and those who work with these agencies to do more with less. And that is particularly true when it comes to areas of science and technology under this committee's jurisdiction. And my concern is that when we do that, and then they fail to meet goals, and they fail to achieve objectives, we bring them before this committee and other committees in the Congress, and we chastise them for not meeting the goals and the objectives when we have taken away the resources with which they need to do that. I think that is an unreasonable expectation to say that we are that we want the agency to continue to fulfill its responsibilities, add additional responsibilities, and then flatline their funding and not give them the funding that they need. And I think that the gentleman's amendment that's at the desk in front of us simply seeks to give us a little bit of discipline in terms of what we expect of agencies. And either we want them to do the work and achieve the goals that we set out with appropriate resources, or we shouldn't ask them to do the work. And I'm particularly sensitive to that. NIST is headquartered in my district. I'm out there all the time. I see the work that they do and appreciate their professionalism, but we have to stop asking our agencies to do more work with fewer resources. And with that, I yield.
Gentlelady yields back her time. Is there further discussion on the amendment? Chair hears none. Hearing no further discussion, the vote will occur on the amendment. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Chair opinion, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for a recorded vote, please.
Recorded votes requested. Clerk will call the roll.
Chairman Hall.
No.
Chairman Hall votes no. Mr. Sensenbrenner. No. Mr. Sensenbrenner votes no. Mr. Smith. No. Mr. Smith votes no. Mr. Roybacher. No. Mr. Roybacher votes no. Mr. Bartlett. No. Mr. Bartlett votes no. Mr. Lucas. Mrs. Biggert. No. Mrs. Biggert votes no. Mr. Aiken. Mr. Nagelbauer. Mr. McCaul. No. Mr. McCaul votes no. Mr. Brown. No. Mr. Brown votes no. Mrs. Adams. Mrs. Adams votes no. Mr. Quayle. Mr. Fleischman. No. Mr. Fleischman votes no. Mr. Ridgell. Mr. Ridgell votes no. Mr. Palazzo. No. Mr. Palazzo votes no. Mr. Brooks. No. Mr. Brooks votes no. Mr. Harris. Mr. Harris votes no. Mr. Haltgren. No. Mr. Haltgren votes no. Mr. Kravac.
No.
Mr. Kravac votes no. Mr. Bouchon. Mr. Benishek. No. Mr. Benishek votes no. Ms. Johnson. Aye. Ms. Johnson votes aye. Mr. Costello. Aye. Mr. Costello votes aye. Ms. Woolsey. Ms. Lofgren. Aye. Ms. Lofgren votes aye. Mr. Wu. Aye. Mr. Wu votes aye. Mr. Miller. Mr. Lipinski. Aye. Mr. Lipinski votes aye. Ms. Giffords. Ms. Edwards. Aye. Ms. Edwards votes aye. Ms. Fudge. Aye. Ms. Fudge votes aye. Mr. Lujan. Aye. Mr. Lujan votes aye. Mr. Tonko.
Aye.
Mr. Tonko votes aye. Mr. McNerney. Aye. Mr. McNerney votes aye. Mr. Sarbanes. Ms. Sewell. Ms. Sewell votes aye. Ms. Wilson. Ms. Wilson votes aye. Mr. Clarke. Mr. Clarke votes aye.
Are there other members who wish to vote?
Are there other amendments who wish to vote? Other members who wish to vote? Is the clerk ready to report the vote?
Mr. Chairman, 13 members vote aye and 17 members vote no.
On this vote, there were 17 ayes and 13 ayes and 17 noes. The amendment is not agreed to. Are there any other amendments? Hearing none, the questions on the bill, H.R. 2096, the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2011, as amended. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The bill's passed.
Agreed.
All right, now that we've passed the bill and we've agreed to it, I want to recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCaul, to offer a motion.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I offer the motion, I just want to, again, thank you and the ranking member and Mr. Lipinski for all of your hard work on this issue. It is refreshing in a time where we have so many issues that divide us. This is one of those issues that I think brings us together. And so with that, I move that the committee favorably report H.R. 2096 as amended to the House with the recommendation that the bill do pass. Furthermore, I move that the staff be instructed to prepare the legislative report and make necessary technical and conforming changes, and that the chairman take all necessary steps to bring the bill before the House for consideration.
Mr. Chairman,
Who seeks recognition?
me down here, Lynn Woolsey. I would like to ask
Ms.
unanimous.
Woolsey, I'm in the process of calling the vote right now. I'll recognize you in just a moment.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, sir.
The questions on the motion report the bill. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the resolution is reported. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
Now you can recognize him.
Members have 2 subsequent calendar days in which to submit supplemental, minority, or additional views on the measure. I move pursuant to Clause 1 of the Rule 22 of the Rules of the House of Representatives that the committee authorizes the chairman to offer such motions as may be necessary in the House to adopt and pass H.R. 2096, the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2011, as amended. And without objection, it's so ordered. Chair now recognizes Mrs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to vote for Mr. Tonko's amendment, and I would have voted yes. I don't think it changes the total at all.
Mr. Chairman.
I was on my way over here.
Yeah, who seeks recognition?
Object.
There is objection.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Tonko, would you like to be heard first? Mr. Lujan, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, at the time that votes were said that they were going to be rolled, we were told members would be notified, and there was no notification for members to vote, and now there's an objection when a member showed up to ask UC to be included here. I think that we're just asking for some fairness for those members that did make it back, and those members that did want to vote that were told we'd be notified before we would vote.
Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brown.
Mr. Chairman, I have been convinced by my dear friend, Ben Lujan, and I will withdraw my objection.
Objection's withdrawn. Good job, Mr. Lujan.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Lujan.
Mr. Chairman.
All right, who seeks recognition?
Same amendment, right? Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I guess I would fall in that category as well, as I thought when we did the roll votes that we were going to have some notification, and there's probably 5 or 6 police cars behind me that'll be here any minute, but we sped over here as quickly as we could, and so I need to, get out of here pretty quick before they get here, but I would like to be recorded as...
We'll let the record reflect that you would have
voted no, that's correct.
No, and we'll go your bond if they show up. Mr. Lucas recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I too was on the way and would like to be noted as a no vote.
I'm going with you guys next time.
Yes, sir.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Mr. Lucas be voted. All right. Mr. Bouchon, you asked to be recorded as support of the bill.
No.
Mr. Chairman, on second
And no
thought.
on the amendment. All right. I think the gentlelady from Texas wants to be heard.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Mr. Quayle
A no vote on the amendment.
asked for a no vote on the amendment. Is there objection? Did we clear Mr. Buchan? Asked for a no vote. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Who else? Mr. Who?
Okay. Here we go.
We took care of Mr.
This
Quayle.
changes the vote to
All
what?
Okay,
All right. Now, Chair recognizes the ranking member, Mrs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I simply want to apologize for allowing my thoughts to become spoken words when when I said we look like a bunch of fools. I really meant it, but I don't. I usually don't do things like that in the midst of a full committee, and I don't want to imply that I think this committee a bunch of fools. I think we are one of the most respected committees for dealing with very intellectual material, and so I apologize for using that phrase. What I was concerned about is the inflexibility of just making a simple correction. It's not common for this committee, my years of being here, to act so quickly in that way. However, knowing the times, and I respect you so much, I just want to apologize for allowing those thoughts to become spoken words. Thank you.
Gentlelady, yield back to us. That's fools. Gentlelady yields back. All right. This concludes our full committee markup. We are adjourned.